Chapter 11. The Tyrant Salamander. The river's undertow and surging current grew increasingly forceful, carrying us helplessly forward. The massive creature trailing us acted like a persistent shadow. Its bulk was submerged, stirring waves upon waves of water. The cavern was too dark to see it clearly, but its roaring presence suggested an immense size, at least 7 or 8 meters long. As we approached the final stretch of the dark river, the current intensified. Clinging to each other to avoid being separated, the four of us were whirled around by the waters and eventually plunged down into an opening. We landed in a vast subterranean river that harbored scorchingly warm waters, housing countless tributaries like the one we had just traversed, which burst forth from the walls in powerful jets, converging into the main waterway below. Along the river's edges were protruding stone holes spewing white, high-temperature gases, and some crevices glowed with dull red magma. Indeed, we seemed to have arrived at the subterranean volcanic region Luoning described. The river was alarmingly warm, and we struggled desperately to clamber onto a massive rock by the bank. We noticed even the stone was heated, and with lava nearby providing a dim light. I switched off the flashlight to conserve precious battery life. I asked the others, "Did any of you see clearly what was behind us just now?" It was huge. Both the big guy and Luoning shook their heads, indicating they hadn't seen it well. Gawa had it worst. He'd swallowed so much water his belly looked ready to burst. Before he could speak, he spat out more water while rubbing his stomach, and finally gasped out, "I saw it. Something huge following us," then splashed down into the middle of the river. To be prepared for whatever might come, the big guy stood up with his bayonet ready to investigate the nearby river when a blood-red, 2-meter-long tongue suddenly lashed out from the water. It wrapped around his legs, pulling him down and towards the river. Thankfully, Gawa reacted swiftly, stabbing the monstrous tongue with his bayonet. The creature yelped in pain, releasing the big guy, and emerged from the water, revealing eerie eyes glowing like red lamps as it crawled out of the river. It resembled the earlier salamander the big guy had shot, frog-headed and crocodile-like in body, only it was far more massive, measuring over 10 meters in length. Its skin flickered with iridescent scale-like patterns. Its large tail swung menacingly as it locked its terrifying gaze upon us. In panic, I questioned Luoning, "Are you certain it doesn't harm humans? How can this one be so big?" Pale and trembling, Luoning admitted, I meant the previous one. This is the tyrant salamander. Very aggressive. They were supposed to have gone extinct during the Ice Age. I can't believe one is still alive here. No one anticipated encountering such a ferocious, prehistoric beast in this secluded environment. Salamanders, being cold-blooded creatures, had become especially aggressive due to the high geothermal heat. Furthermore, Gawa had wounded its tongue, the blood priming the tyrant salamander for attack. Additionally, we couldn't tell if the one we had previously killed was relative to this behemoth. The fight was on, a bitter clash where neither side could afford to give in. Signaling a plan, the big guy and Gawa understood. They flanked the tyrant salamander from both sides, forming a pincer attack. The salamander roared and thrashed at us with claws and teeth. Before we could move, it swept its tail, knocking Gawa to the ground, coiling around him and preparing to strike with a gaping maw. The creature's mouth was supposed to be toothless, but this tyrant salamander's jaws bore 3 rows of sharp teeth. If it bit down, it would mean instant death. In the emergency, the big guy and I lunged in, one high and one low, grabbing hold of the creature's jaws, doing everything to prevent it from clamping shut on Gawa. The non-religious Gawa, now fearless, fought back despite being entangled. He stabbed desperately with his bayonet directly into the creature's mouth. Wounded and enraged, the salamander thrashed and managed to shake us off. I was flung against a rock, my head reeling with stars, while the big guy fell into the water, scalding and emerging with steaming burns. Facing off against such a vast creature with just our bayonets was like bringing an egg against a rock. The 4 of us shouted and fled, the tyrant salamander in hot pursuit. The ground beneath us was composed of volcanic rock and ash. It was soft and slippery, making our escape all the more difficult. In a desperate bid to shake off the pursuing giant monster, we clambered onto the steeper volcanic rocks by the river's edge, climbing higher using hands and feet. I had reached halfway when I heard the big guy yelling at me to be careful. Glancing down, the tyrant salamander was scaling the cliff like a massive lizard, closing in fast and barely 3 meters below me. Its long tongue was nearly within reach of my heels. I contemplated jumping back into the river to escape, but I was too high up and the risk of missing the water and hitting the rocks was too high. Cursing, I freed a hand to draw my bayonet, bracing myself for a last stand. If I was going to die, I'd take the creature down with me. The other 3 could see that the tyrant salamander was nearly upon me, but the incline of the cliff was too steep for them to come to my aid in time. They looked on helplessly, teeth clenched and eyes wide with frustration, powerless to intervene.